She said she's magical, mystical, a powerful wonder girl.
With Me Too and Time's Up, women from all walks of life are sharing their experiences of being mistreated, abused, objectified. Joining us now is Jess Tomlin, the president and CEO of the Match International Women's Fund, whose new campaign, #RestingStitchface, plays with subversive cross-stitch patterns to fight oppression, starting with language. Welcome to the show, Jess.
Thank you. It's great to be back.
So tell us more about this Resting Stitch Face campaign.
Maybe I'll start quickly by where we come from as the Match International Women's Fund. So what we do is we invest in women's movements around the world, from South Sudan to Kenya to India to Georgia. And we really invest in the women's movements who are driving political systems change at the grassroots. And this Me Too moment, you're very right, is absolutely inspiring. I fundamentally believe we're at a tipping point for women's rights in Canada and around the world. And so we've been thinking a lot about what's it really going to take to get to that boiling point and fundamentally shift the conversation. And what we do in our work is that we look at a lot of the things that are much more deep-rooted, the norms, the attitudes, the behaviors, the cultures, the assumptions that are perpetuated over time that really harm women and hold them back. And what we're noticing here in Canada is that same thing applies. And so I have a little story that I'll tell you briefly that I think gives you a sense of where this campaign comes from. I am a feminist, have been working in the women's rights space around the world for the last 20 years, and I have an 8-year-old daughter. This summer, my 8-year-old daughter, Sophia, was complaining about a boy at school who was picking on her. And, she was like, he bullies me, he bugs me, he pushes me down. And she had been coming to me with this a few times. And before I could even stop myself, I said, oh, he probably likes you. Me.
You said that.
Me.
Ingrained, right?
That's it. And
it's like he punches you in the arm because he's got a crush on you.
And it was this awakening moment for me, in spite of all the education and all of the travel and all of the work I do every single day to fight women's rights, that there are these deeply held assumptions and beliefs. And once we get to that and start to reveal that, is when I really think we're going to shift the dial.
So what did you say to your daughter when you realized what you'd said?
Well, once I got over my own shock, I was like, you get back down here. You get back down here. The way a boy shows you he likes you is not by hurting you, ever. Mm-hmm. And it's your job to say no. And it's your job to start a new conversations. And it got me thinking about all these little girls who have been told that it's okay for boys to show them affection or show them that they care by being violent. And I think that that's how we're seeing some of this perpetuate in our everyday lives, given the violence statistics.
So, but really, you didn't say anything wrong. You just stopped short of saying what should have followed, which is, he probably likes you. He doesn't yet understand that when you like somebody, this is not the way to express it.
This is from the mother of twin boys.
Twin boys. And trust me, I interceded a lot in terms of their behavior. Mm-hmm. Because they learn it in the schoolyard, and I was not going to have any of that, right?
No, absolutely, but it's norms and attitudes and behaviors, right? There's a whole school out there, right, in society that teaches boys they can and should. I'm
just wondering whether it's not the boy moms that have the work.
Boy moms have a lot of work.
Instead of the girl moms.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I felt that I had to set them right in behaviors that I didn't find acceptable, or reactions that just came naturally from, again, mimicking what's around.
So much of the marginalization, as you were saying, is rooted in the language and the narrative. So how do we change something that is so ingrained?
Well, it's one of these things, like, for me, you can't unsee things, right? And you can't unlearn things. And for me, I'm excited because I actually think getting to this stage is really sophisticated. We are kind of really getting to the nuts and bolts of what needs to fundamentally shift within our culture in order for things to move forward. And I think we need to recognize that these traditions and assumptions get passed on through generations from women and from men. right? So we at the office had this really interesting exercise when we decided that this is what we were going to do. I have a team of women who come from everywhere, from the Gambia to Kenya to Egypt to Sri Lanka, and we all started to populate ideas around the kinds of things we heard at the kitchen table and the kind of beliefs that were shared. And there were hundreds of pieces. There were hundreds of bits and pieces on that list. And what was exciting, I think, was the revelation was, it's locker room talk, or boys will be boys, or or would it kill you to smile, or why buy the cow if you can get the milk for free?
Ooh, that's what my mom used to say.
Right? And it's just, I think that pause that it creates to think about, what? I have never questioned that for the last X number of years, and suddenly that doesn't sound right anymore.
Yeah, it doesn't sound right anymore. So, but it's hard because, some things, I think, like we were talking about the resting bitch face. I don't particularly find that offensive because I think it's true, as Amy Schumer says. How come I always look like I have resting bitch face, and Jennifer Lawrence, when we're photographed, always looks perfect? It's just because it's sort of a look. But is it the word bitch that is offensive?
Yeah, I think it's the assumption that, it kind of ties into that, would it kill you to smile?
Yeah.
Or you'd be so pretty if you put some work into it, or
Right.
these types of things. It's like the societal expectation that
Exactly.
women are smiling and ready to be talked to and all of that stuff.
So now the Match Fund is Canada's only global women's fund supporting innovations led by women, girls, and trans people at the grassroots level, right? So tell us about one of the ones that I like is Blandine, a millennial who designed an app to save the lives of mothers and babies in her home country.
Yeah, one of the things that we do is we try to, we try to dispel the myth that innovation is only through the use of technology.
Right.
But there are many young women, particularly in very marginalized parts of the world, from Malawi to Kenya to Egypt, who are using technologies to adapt. So Blandine is a particular case from Malawi, I believe, who
Rwanda.
This is, yes.
Rwanda.
We also work with the Blandine in Malawi, but she comes from a very underprivileged circumstance, and she started to acknowledge that women and girls and mums and babies were not getting the services that they needed, so started to connect them with health providers. And we are doing very similar things, for example, in Egypt, where we're supporting an organization where young women have developed a geomapping technology to help women identify where rape and harassment is happening in the streets of Egypt.
Wow.
So how can we help others to have their voice heard through the grassroots organizations that the Match Fund supports?
Well, I think what the Me Too movement shows us, and I think we need to remember this, that this just didn't come out of a vacuum, right? That the moment that we're in, which I fundamentally believe we'll be reading about in history books in 30 years. I think this is our 60s moment. And it isn't just out of nowhere, that this has been the long-standing marathon that activists around the world have been running for decades to get us to this point, challenging systems, laws, behaviors, fundamentally trying to challenge the status quo, holding ground and protecting hard-won gains, as well as trying to break new ground. And I think that we need to showcase the work that's been happening in this on the sidelines, and acknowledge that the work of grassroots women's movements, feminists, and from all walks of life are the ones that have really got us to this point, which is really, really exciting. And one thing I would say is the reason that we do what we do is because the average annual budget of a women's rights organization outside of Canada is $20,000 a year. So if we acknowledge that they are at the precipice of shifting the gender equality paradigm, then imagine what we could do if they were properly supported.
Where can people go to learn more?
Well, for us, it's matchinternational.org.
Okay.
And there you can see a whole list of all the partners we support around the world and the work we're trying to do.
All right.
It's wonderful.
And the hashtag resting
Stitch face.
will be out there if you want to have some things. And watch what you say. I put my foot in my mouth with my girls plenty of times when they were growing up. They called me on it. They called me on it a lot and said, nope, wrong thinking.
Awesome.
Yeah, update yourself.
Well, Jess Tolman, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Well, she